Bonjour à tous. If you're meeting me for the first time, my name is Madame Hugo, your unconventional online French tutor. In today's tutorial, we are going to be talking about adjectives. So, adjective forms a critical part of foundational French, especially for beginners. And today, I am going to unpack the lesson on adjectives in French. Now, it is important to note that the way French uses adjective is different from the way we use our adjectives in English. For instance, in English, we usually do not accord any gender to our adjectives, and we also do not make our adjectives plural in English, but it is not the same with French. When it comes to French, in fact, 90% of the time, adjectives in French are positioned after the noun. While about 10%, this is just making a rough estimate before the noun. It may not even be up to 10%, but let's just run with this number. The next thing you need to understand about adjectives in French is that adjectives in French respect gender. Okay? And adjectives in French also respect number. By this, I mean when you want to accord an adjective to a masculine gendered noun or a feminine gendered noun, that adjective must conform to the gender of the noun you want to use it for. It must agree. On the other hand, when you want to use an adjective with a noun in the singular form or in the plural form, it must also conform. This is what we mean by adjectives in French respecting gender and respecting number. And we are going to see some examples once we go deeper into the lessons. Now, the next thing I would like to talk about here is the things we need to know about how to express our adjectives in French. For example, when we want to describe a noun in French, I am going to illustrate what I have said in the past about most adjectives in French coming after the noun with these illustrations. Look at our expressions in English. We have something like this: social activity. We have physical abuse. We have social event. We have mental stress. We have mental health. So when we look at expressions like this, we have social activity, physical abuse, social event, mental stress, okay, local music, and so on and so forth. So if I want to write these expressions in French, it is important first to identify between these two words which of them is the noun and which of them is the adjective. So looking at these two words that we have here together, it is obvious that the noun here is activity. And by the way, in French, we call activity l'activité. L'activité. And did you know that most nouns in French, that have the suffix ity, if you want to use them in French, they will have letter E with an accent. Look at a typical example. If you want to say quality, for example, in French, this becomes qualité. That's what we call it. Capacity. In French, this becomes capacité. But please, it's not in all cases that this is applicable, but 90% of the time it is applicable. All right, so let's continue. So we have here social activity. If I want to say this expression in French, I will say l'activité sociale. Now, watch the way I'm going to write this adjective. I'm going to put an E because the noun l'activité is a feminine gendered noun. So I will add an E to ensure that the adjective, because the adjective here is social. Social is what describes the type of activity that we are talking about. Therefore, it is an adjective. Remember the definition of an adjective. What is an adjective? An adjective is a word that gives you information about the features of a noun. Okay? So we move to the next one. We have physical abuse. So between these two words, obviously the one that is a noun here is abuse. So if you want to say physical abuse in French, you will say l'abus physique. Okay? Now, social event. If you want to say social event, in French, event is a masculine gendered noun and we call it l'événement. So this becomes l'événement social. No E is added. And mental stress. This mental, of course, is the adjective, while stress is the noun. So this remains le stress mental. Mental health. Now, health in French is a feminine gendered noun and we call it la santé. So, if you want to say mental health in French becomes la santé mentale. I will add E at the end of the adjective mental. Then we have here local music. So if I want to say local music in French, music is obviously a feminine gendered noun. If you recall the lesson we did in our lesson 1 or lesson 2 where I talked about our nouns and how to tell their gender, music is actually one of those nouns where you have a word or a noun in French that has a suffix as QUE. Usually in French, they are feminine gendered noun, and music is one of them. So if you want to say local music in French, you will say la musique locale. All right? So this gives a kind of picture into what I talked about earlier on by adjectives in French respecting gender. Now, how about if we decide to make these expressions in the plural? So you want to say something like this: social activities. Okay? So social activities in French, we will make but the definite article plural. Of course, this means the lesson 1 or lesson 2. So this becomes les activités sociales. Our adjective will also be in the plural here. So you want to say physical abuse, physical abuses, and so on. Social events, you make it plural, social events. So if you want to write social events, for example, this becomes les événements sociaux. Okay? So in French, when you want to make your noun, especially a masculine noun, that its last spelling letter is AL. In the plural, you make it AUS. It is in our lesson 2 or lesson 3, where we talked about making our nouns plural. So if this is a noun, for example, you have l'animal. Okay, this is the animal. If you want to say the animals or animals, you will say les animaux. Okay, so it's important that we take note of this. All right, so having said all of this, let's now dig into common nouns and adjectives we might talk about. Now, in the tutorial on adjectives, I am going to take us through the 360 degrees of all of the aspects of adjectives we are going to be talking about in French. So we will talk about adjectives in terms of our general adjectives, so we'll talk about our general adjectives. Okay, we will talk about comparative adjectives. We will talk about superlative adjectives. We will talk about irregular adjectives. We will talk about indefinite adjectives. We will talk about demonstrative adjectives. And the last but not the least, we will talk about possessive adjectives. All right, so for the sake of today's lectures, we are going to kick off with general adjectives. So if you haven't taken your note up to this point, please take a screenshot as I wipe off the board. So when it comes to general adjectives, it is important that we also know there are instances where adjectives come before the noun in French. So the way I am going to segment this class, I am going to first of all talk about adjectives that come before the noun. And the reason is that there are quite a few and far in between. Afterwards, we will now look at the classification for general adjectives. So let me start with the adjectives that come before the noun. So there are certain parameters that I use in making it easy for students to understand the adjectives that come before the noun. So let's start with the first one. So any adjective that describes appearance, okay? So by appearance, this is what I mean. Adjective of new, young, or old should come before the noun, okay? So these classes of adjectives will come before the noun. So if you want to say she is driving a new car, okay, things like that, that new should come before the noun, okay? The young doctor is here, young doctor. That young, describing the doctor, is an adjective that comes before the noun, all right? So the next parameter that we can use to know our adjective that comes before the noun is adjective of good looks. By good looks, we mean something that is beautiful, okay, attractive, and handsome. they also come before the noun. The next parameter is adjective of height. And by this, we mean in terms of short or tall. It has to come before the noun. The next one is adjective of length. So under this, we have long or short. Of course, this is the one you would use for non-living things. Okay. The next parameter is adjective of body size. And this is in terms of fat or small, not thin. The next one is adjective of position. So if you want to say first, second, last, okay, they always come before the noun. And the last but not the least, we also have adjective of good or bad. They come before the noun. All right, so having taken care of all of the description for the parameters that we can use to identify the adjectives that come before the noun. So let's make examples for each of these classifications of adjectives. So I will start with adjective of appearance, since it is the first one on the board. All right, so it is important to know that when it comes to new, the adjective new, in French, new can either be nouveau, okay, or it can be nouvelle, or it can be nouvelle. So the question would be, when do I know which one to use? So this is the one you use when you are talking about masculine singular noun that has its first letter as a consonant. Okay, we use nouveau. And nouvelle is the adjective we use for new when we are talking about a masculine singular noun that has its first letter as a vowel, while nouvelle is the adjective we use when we are talking about a feminine singular noun. It doesn't matter whether the first letter is a vowel or a consonant. So let's make an example. So I want to say, he is watching the new movie. He is watching the new movie. Okay, so he is watching the new movie. Here will be il regarde le nouveau film. That's what it will be. And number two, so this is me using nouveau. Film or movie in French is called le film. It's a masculine gendered noun. so we use nouveau. So I'm going to make an example using nouvelle, the one that has its first letter as a vowel. So I want to say, I live in the new apartment. So this becomes j'habite. Okay? Dans le nouvel appartement. So I will use nouvelle here. Why am I using nouvelle here? Because the first letter of this masculine noun is a vowel. Apartment, l'appartement, that's what we call it in French, and it is a masculine gendered noun. Remember that I told us that 99% of the time, most nouns that have their ending as ment are usually masculine gendered noun. While in our number one example, the noun we are talking about is le film. Its first letter is a consonant, while here its first letter is a vowel. So if I want to use feminine gendered adjective nouvelle, so I want to say, the boy is cleaning the new house. So this becomes le garçon nettoie la nouvelle maison, because house is a feminine gendered noun. And this is how we use our adjective new in French, depending on the gender of the noun that you are using it with. So to recap this lesson, it is important to know that when we want to talk about the adjective of new in French, one, they must come before the noun, and two, it is important to note that when you are talking about a masculine gendered noun that has its first letter as a vowel, you use nouveau. When you're talking about a masculine, that has a consonant, you use nouveau. When you're talking about a masculine gendered noun that has its first letter as a vowel, you use nouvelle with one L. And when you're talking about a feminine gendered noun with its whether the first letter is a consonant or a vowel, you're going to still use nouvelle in the feminine gender. Now, to finally wrap up on this topic, let's imagine that we are making these sentences in plural. You are going to see how this is going to turn up. Now, please pay careful attention, especially to nouveau, the one that has this ending as you, this one. So I want to say, I am reading the new novels today. So novel in French is called le roman, and it is a masculine gendered noun. So I will write this. I will say, je lis les. So my new here is going to be nouveau with X. Okay? When your adjectives end with you in French, if you want to make it plural, you're going to add X, okay? When using them with your nouns, your plural nouns. So this becomes, je lis les nouveaux romans aujourd'hui. Okay? This is how you use it, okay? So I want to say, she works at the new buildings. So building I'm going to use here is going to be les immeubles, okay? The one that has its first letter as a vowel. So this becomes, elle travaille aux nouveaux immeubles. So you can see that my adjective is plural here. Likewise in number one. So this is how you use your adjectives in a very correct grammatical structure in French. And the last but not the least, make an example using a plural feminine gendered noun. I'm going to use new. So I want to say the lady is buying the new dresses. Okay, the lady is buying the new dresses. So this becomes la dame achète les nouvelles robes. So you can see, based on what I stated earlier, that in French we should ensure that our adjectives conform both to the gender of the noun and also to the number of the noun. When the noun is plural, you make your adjective plural. When your noun is masculine, you make your adjective masculine in French. Please keep your eyes peeled on this page as we continue to develop the lessons on adjective. I hope you've been able to learn something today. Please support us by liking what we are doing here, sharing the page, participating, make some examples using some of the nouns that you can think of using the adjective of new. I would love to read from you. Until I see you some other time. Bye for now. Au revoir.